In modern society, the medium of film is primarily used to tell a story. An original film, no matter how unique, has been influenced by over 100 years of cinematic storytelling, not to mention thousands of years of stories told in other mediums. In a way, everything is a sequel or reimagining of another story. As a society, our understanding of complex storytelling has reached a point where most people are capable of grasping the concept of a multiverse. Some critics and fans believe this means we don't have to care about continuity anymore, or they make ridiculous videos claiming plot holes don't matter. Sure, some stories are silly or mind-bending enough to tell the kind of story they want to very well without being restrained by logical consistency or continuity. A favorite of mine for incorporating that into the story itself is an unreliable narrator. The problem is that not all stories can be good without continuity or logical consistency within the story itself. When a sequel is made to a film, it should strive to maintain the same levels as the original film in order to connect and root the story as a sequel. That includes the consistency of the characters and the logic of the world itself. If you have your own story to tell that doesn't work with the characters from the original film you are making a sequel to, then use your own characters instead. If it doesn't work with the logical consistency established in the world, then use your own world. Limitations in writing stories are important to see not as impassable ceilings that prevent you from attaining greater heights, but as parts of the puzzle in which the piece you are holding does not fit. Inspiration in stories comes from turning the pieces around until you find a way to fit them all together. Characters aren't static, but making serious changes to the shape of their puzzle piece between installments in a story makes for an ugly puzzle, particularly when they are dead and you're basically using a piece from the wrong puzzle. There's a reason they didn't bring back Kyle Reese to be the protector from the future in Terminator 2. The piece of the Terminator robot itself was a template, though, a bare-bones robot that will not stop in its mission. One that fit great into the slot of a protector from the future with the simple creative turnaround of changing its programming from kill to protect. From that, the piece grew with the introduction of its learning computer, allowing it to grow and fill the story's open role of surrogate father as well.
Watching John with the machine, it was suddenly so clear. The Terminator would never stop. It would never leave him. And it would never hurt him, never shout at him or get drunk and hit him or say it was too busy to spend time with him. It would always be there, and it would die to protect him. Of all the would-be fathers who came and went over the years, this thing, this machine, was the only one who measured up. In an insane world, it was the sanest choice.
It did something as a film that only a consistent and a creative sequel can truly do well. It elevated the original film's story by giving it a satisfying conclusion, making it a longer and more complete story. The first Terminator film had done something horror movies often do, and created a border of interlocking puzzle pieces with big, mysterious, empty spaces in the middle, that unknown that lets you be afraid. The second film told a story that ended Judgment Day and decided we make our own fate, wrapping up the story with a conclusion and filling in a lot of those large, empty spaces. It could have been a perfect ending, but as often happens with great sequels that are financially successful, more is demanded. Could there have been a way to creatively continue the story without destroying what the first two succeeded in creating? Probably not. But maybe with a little more time and less baggage from the bad sequels. I can say for sure that television series as a sequel to a film can work great. Even if they do have to hand-wave or ignore some of the finer points of the science talk from the film. For those who don't remember, Abydos went from being on the other side of the known universe to a close planet in our own galaxy, and Ra was no longer the last of his race, who also were snakes now, which would be a serious continuity problem going from film to film, but is much less noticeable when a series successfully continues a concept for a story while maintaining consistency with the characters at its heart and in its own television universe. Heck, it even works when you only have one character left from the film and most people have forgotten about the movie completely, as long as you build on the pieces that were important to the foundation of the story you are continuing. A great sequel doesn't have to be another film, but a series, of course, runs the risk of continuing too long or ending poorly. But a series, particularly one designed around the classic weekly adventures with season-long arcs, can be a sequel that elevates a film's story by showing how it creates a solid story structure that can be built on or shown off with regular smaller stories. The characters and the world are interesting enough to keep fans' attention without need of spectacle. It's got a framework of puzzle pieces all filled in. Most great sequels are films, though. Some of them take a great fantasy space adventure and turn it into a saga by simply making a trusted mentor a bit of a liar from a certain point of view. Occasionally, it's not the first sequel that elevates an original story into a larger world, but a later sequel. And what happens after a truly great sequel elevates an original film varies wildly. It can bring a franchise back to life, end it in iconic fashion, and even give it new direction. But none of those ever really seem permanent. Some people like to blame Hollywood for stories never being allowed to rest in peace. But the fact is, as humans, we have been storytellers for generations. Sometimes retelling stories with our own characters and worlds changed just enough to make it our own, while still embodying the spirit of a story from before in a loving and respectful way. Sometimes in an irreverent and silly fashion. The fact is, the stories that are worth retelling will get retold, sometimes with comedic changes. The only real difference with stories in film is that most of them are not yet public domain, so only a particular rights holder can tell stories within that particular story world. The thing about public domain stories is that you can try creating whatever weird stories you want, and everybody knows you're just trying to make a funny-looking puzzle picture, or add a little of your own color. We will always have the original story, thanks to a series of record-keeping inventions from the printing press to the internet. But sometimes, a modern update, instead of being a sequel to a classic, finds a way to retell the heart of the story with modern characters and values in a late 20th century setting instead of 16th century Italy, for example. The stories, whose rights are owned privately instead of by the public, are in a way living stories, still having their core worlds filled in with pieces of the puzzle. Some of them are being handled beautifully, while others are a tragic mess, even in the hands of their creators. Some stories have a foundation in their original medium strong enough to resurrect them into new film translations, no matter how many times a film version has already come and gone. Which, for some fans, gives them hope that in 20 years or so after the books are finished, a new storyteller may come along and retell the whole story of the Game of Thrones books as a new series that has a satisfying ending this time and becomes the new standard. In the end, it is the passion of fans that truly determines a story's longevity. There's a reason The Lord of the Rings persisted as a cherished and important book long before the films gave it mass popularity, regardless of earlier adaptation attempts. As long as people are telling stories, there will be sequels. Most will be bad, some will be good, and a few will elevate a story into a larger world that inspires its own multiverse of connected stories and spiritual successors. Sequels give stories a chance to become greater than a single original story can be on its own. And that is why I'll never get tired of sequels, or mad at Hollywood for making a lot of sequels. You don't have to be mad to point out the mistakes a sequel makes, or suggest how things could be turned around to fit into the puzzle better. You just have to be invested in the original story, becoming greater than it could be on its own. Or even invested in the heart of a privately owned story, the concept and idea that a story's private owner's current sequel is missing, and reach a point where you can creatively turn around all those privatized elements to make a sequel in spirit, though not in name. In the end, sequels are the children of stories. Some are bastards, some are direct descendants, some are even adopted. They establish a sort of spiritual bloodline, one that can only be traced so far back before every story's lineage starts to converge. They are a legacy that is handed down to us, and that we hand down to our own children and their children. Over time, bad stories tend to fade away and die off, but that doesn't alleviate the responsibility of fans to voice their opinions on sequels that are threatening the very legacy of the stories they are trying to preserve and strengthen. So please, support all of us fans out here on YouTube voicing our opinions about stories and sequels by liking and sharing fan videos like this one. Thank you for your time.